70 men, women, emergent learners, people who have advanced graduate degrees, and a variety of both primary languages and alphabets. And these are the languages of my most current group of students. I speak some Spanish, but I don't speak any Armenian, Chinese, French, Swahili, Pashto, Russian, or Farsi. So I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge to set this up. And indeed it has been, but it's been a rewarding one. I started out doing some private sessions, but then when I had gotten some more confidence, decided I would hold a class for the students I could reach the same evenings as our library class, because I thought, well, that was a time we were accustomed to, and we've been doing it for an hour and a half, slightly later time at 7 rather than 6. And I reached out to students. Largely they were ones who had met English-speaking family members who had brought them in, who I was in touch with. I tried getting a hold of people through their registration forms, but as we have discussed, many of them either didn't provide complete information or it's illegible, or in some cases I tried and things bounced back. I have been using Zoom, and I've used PowerPoint like I'm using now. I've used the sharing of the whiteboard. I've used Word, and critical for me has been the ability to mute and unmute students. I prefer to leave them unmuted, but I have some who have a lot of background noise at home, and so muting them has been pretty important. My first group is about 6 to 7 students, and that's been a pretty good size to cut my teeth on. I've been using props, reality, photo printouts, and whiteboards, real whiteboards, in addition to the stuff with Zoom. And again, it depends a little bit on the lesson and a little bit where I am in the learning curve. Fortunately, my assistant tutor, Sherry, has been helping with modeling, because I decided, since I had no idea where to start, to use the Minnesota Literacy Council lesson plans as my jumping off point. My students had voted on food, which was great because it's a wonderful unit to use with this. And so I'll take some of the suggested things, like in this case, we're talking about where it goes in the refrigerator, and with Sherry, I can model a dialogue and together, and then the students will work with one of us, and then the students can work with each other. We haven't yet tried breakout rooms, because I think that would be a little bit hard for them at this point, and I would personally like to try them out with others before I try them with my students. And the chat feature, I think, is beyond the ability of my students to use, so I haven't used that either. But this, I think, has worked pretty darn well, and I'm very glad that Sherry has been joining me to model, because I think that has helped tremendously. Without it, I think I would have been getting the same blank looks that you sometimes get in live class when they don't know what's going on. What I've liked about it, I love connecting with the students again. I'm getting to know the ones that are participating better. It's been a great challenge to learn to teach online and keep my brain from atrophying completely during this quarantine period. I think it's improving my overall teaching skills, because it's forcing me to examine ways of doing things that are within very specific constraints. And it's been my therapy. I have this picture of one of my students up on my desk, and she has a laugh that I want to bottle. Whenever I'm feeling kind of bad about things, I think of Katu and everything she's been through and how wonderful she is. And she's one of my students in this class. And it really helps me get through rough patches right now. For the students, it's an opportunity to practice English. Since they're beginners, a lot of them are living in situations where they wouldn't be speaking English at all otherwise. And so at least they're doing a little bit. They're improving their tech skills. I'll talk more about tech skills in a minute, but at least they are having to do some of it. In a way, it levels the playing field, because what I've discovered works well is I call on the students in turn. And so each one knows they're going to be answering or modeling, and they have to speak up. And a couple of them who in class spoke very quietly are speaking louder and with a little bit more confidence on the Zoom class, which has been a pleasant surprise. Students who have left Tucson can participate. I've got a woman who went back to China with her son, and they join us from China. And amazingly enough, my evening class, it's 10 in the morning the next day, and there they are. 100% of my have required tech assistance. The woman in China speaks some English. She had largely joined for the benefit of her son, but without that, they haven't been able to participate, and I don't know that any of them could without that. So some of it is lack of education, some of it's lack of equipment, and some of it is they're emergent readers, and the idea of doing any of it is intimidating. So to accommodate the diverse proficiency in techiness, modeling, like I mentioned, has been really, really important. And the more I've done it, the more I realize how much better it is to have it just like in a regular class. Lots of repetition. Having a small class size. In this case, I don't know that I'd want to go much bigger than what we've got, unless we had a whole lot of assistance and the ability to do breakout rooms in a way that I thought wouldn't overwhelm the students. Inherent in the system is this real slow pace, partly because there's a time lag from China, there's a time lag on the different speeds of internet. I had trouble logging on this morning, just for this meeting, they have trouble logging in. So that means we have to go slow, and that's good for all of them. I also started out doing private sessions with the student whose due date is tomorrow. And that really helped me out a lot, and was really, really good for her. She's an emergent reader, and the private sessions were really, really wonderful. So that's something I'm thinking about doing more of with any of my students. And finally,
about 1 more minute. You've got about 1 more minute.
Finally, my advice is, as Kate used to say to us, think baby steps. And that's me.
Oh.
With my parents and my older sister in 1963. And as I started this, I felt a lot like that. You know, the bonnet was obscuring me. I was worried I was going to fall on the coral. And I just have to, for me personally, starting out really small and each class building on things. So I think my first private sessions were just basically we were talking, and then I added in something and I tried something else. And so that would be my one bit of advice, is start out with what you're comfortable with what you have. Don't feel like you have to go all high tech and fancy the first lesson. So that's it.
Thank you.
Let's give Diane a round of applause. What questions do you have for Diane? Feel free to type them in the chat. And as we go forward, just type questions in the chat as they occur to you. You don't need to wait until the end. And if you don't have any questions now, that's okay too. Diane, did you see in the chat that Emily also had tattoo at Rep?
Yes, yes. Raise your hand if you've had tattoo in your class. I know Karen has.
Wonderful.
She's doing great.
Okay, well, as you think of questions, throw them in the chat box. And we will now head over to ELAA teacher, AKA Madeline. Madeline, do you need to share your screen?
No screen sharing here.
All right, so here comes Madeline, who teaches beginning at the Community Food Bank.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I teach, I've been teaching for about 1.5 years, beginning, the class has sort of become beginning level 2. in the time that I've taught. And my class at the food bank was about, I'd say somewhere between 10 to 15 students, 2 days a week. We did 2-hour-long classes in person. When the food bank closed down a little bit sooner than like the libraries and things like that, so our class closed before spring break. So we kind of had the spring break period to discuss what we wanted to do. My class is very tight-knit. It's become a community in and of itself. The students are, other than one man, my students are all women. Everyone is from Mexico. Everyone's native language is Spanish. They formed, independent of our class, formed a WhatsApp group about a year ago and used the WhatsApp group to communicate, and invited me to be part of it last summer after the class ended. So they were in part using it for sharing classwork for people that couldn't make the class, but it also turned into just sort of a community space. So that's been really beneficial for us in terms of figuring out quickly how the class as a whole wanted to adapt to these changes, and people agreed that they wanted to do a Zoom class. So right after spring break, our class started. I changed my schedule. For me, doing any longer than an hour on Zoom makes me feel really tired, and I have a hard time with it. So my classes are now an hour long, 4 days a week. So I'm still doing 4 hours of class a week, but rather than 2 days of 2 hours, I'm doing 4 days of 1 hour. My class is a range of beginning 1 students to intermediate students. So even in person, it was challenging addressing all the different levels. And actually switching to Zoom for 1 hour classes has worked well in that I can offer the first day of the week a sort of principles of English class, and then have a different subject each day of the week. And students can choose to come to which class they feel would best serve them. Everyone is welcome to come to all the classes, but sometimes if people feel frustrated with the more advanced class later in the week, they'll attend the earlier classes. The other thing I've done, in part because I am AmeriCorps and have like a certain amount of hours to complete, is I've been offering private lessons to my students. So at first, a lot of students didn't take advantage of it, but now more and more each week more people are asking for private lessons. I find that to be really beneficial, especially with my more beginning students, where we can review what was talked about that day, or I can prep them for what we'll talk about the next day. So that's been one way that I have accommodated for the sort of different language levels. In terms of technical levels of ability and comfort, I just keep it as low tech as possible. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything because I'm not a technical person, but I have the little board from ELAA, and I literally just write things on it and hold it up to my camera. So our classes are very conversation based. A lot of people write, but when they try to hold their notebook up to the camera, it's often hard to read. So I'm spending all class writing on these various whiteboards that I have and cycling through them. I've never done the screen share or breakout rooms or anything outside of just the most basic facilities of the Zoom software. In part, I feel comfortable with that, but in part, I think the students feel comfortable with it as well. I have attempted to use breakout rooms. I couldn't figure it out, but it kind of like confused everyone what I was doing, and there were a ton of questions. So it's not something that I've gone to. And I think if we are going to be using the online format, I would like to try some of these capabilities, these more advanced capabilities of Zoom. But at the moment, I just want people to feel like the most comfortable that they can and that I can with this dramatic change that we have. So for me, what that looks like is very low tech type of teaching online. Let's see here. So I do feel that the benefits to the students are the private lessons. People are benefiting a lot from that, and I'm benefiting a lot from it too. I find that even though sometimes meeting one-on-one with a person can take a lot of energy, it feels very manageable within Zoom. Having a full class, it's so difficult to read people, to read body language, to assess people's understanding. So doing a one-on-one class has benefited me as well as the students. And it's just been a little bit more like graspable in terms of like, okay, I can teach online. I'm focused on this one person. And I also think, it's interesting because when I was teaching in person at the food bank, everything was subject-based. We voted at the beginning of every term and had our shopping unit and our medicine unit and everything that people wanted to learn. And this time online, it's been much more kind of like what comes up for students. So for instance, talking about comparable adjectives came up last week. So my students asked to learn about using ER and most or more or EST in sentences. So that meant an entire week is now structured around this particular really piece of grammar that people want to learn. And I'm trying really hard to draw out those moments where someone has a question and the rest of the class says, yeah, what is that? And focus on that to try to encourage students to keep self-directing the class. In part, it's easier for me to focus on the grammar rather than the topics because I don't have the capabilities that I have in person of being able to use some of the physical tools that I was using before and really being able to have it be very game-based. A lot of the things that I was using in in-person class are not translating to the internet. So that's why the format has changed a little bit with that.
Madeline, sorry to interrupt, about 1 more minute.
Okay. One piece of advice, I think for one, it's super intimidating for everyone, teachers, students, to do this. I think it's just important to remember that there's no right way to do this, that we're all figuring this out in the moment, and that there's going to be a lot of learning that happens while you're teaching because things will come up and I think that's just the sign of the times. I also agree with Diane, like starting small and baby steps. I think there was a question in the chat about a good size for a class. For me, my class has gone from about 15 students to about 6, and I'm very grateful for that. 5, 6 students feels really manageable to me for an online class. 10 students may feel a little bit overwhelming. Just trying to remember who's had the chance to talk and scrolling through all the little screens to see everyone. So starting small, being patient, experimenting, and going at your level and not feeling a lot of pressure to like master all of these advanced capabilities that Zoom or whatever other platform offers. You can do it with a piece of paper and a cell phone. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Great, let's give her a hand. Yay, thanks, Madeline. So it sounds like smaller is better, and like Madeline, you said 5 to 6 has been really nice. And it sounds like both Madeline and Diane are doing one-on-ones as needed. I noticed that Diane and Madeline, though they're both beginning teachers, are structuring things differently. Diane is doing it for a chunk of time at her normal class time, whereas Madeline has switched to turn her two 2-hour classes into 4 1-hour classes. So really, there's no, unless your students are asking for it, there's no need to stick to your normal class time. It's kind of whatever works for you, whatever works for the students. And I'd also like to highlight something that has been coming out of conversations with our presenters about the importance of connection. It's not about all the whiz-bang Zoom tools. It's about just connecting with each other like we do in class. And that's, that's so much of what we all need right now. So giving yourself some room to explore and grow, and as long as you're connecting, that's great. Bobby asked a question about how to use PowerPoint on Zoom and about games that teachers could use online. And so the short answer to that is that you do screen share, which I know is not helpful. I mean, that's not, unless you're familiar with Zoom, that's not a helpful answer. I'm gonna look up some tutorials to share after this meeting that'll include how to share your screen. And then there are teachers all over the world who are figuring this out and are doing really creative things. So I'll hunt around and see if I can find any games that people are doing on Zoom. Great, keep the questions coming. So next we'll have Allie, who does the conversation part of the Nancy Quo's intensive class. And after Allie presents, we'll take a stretch break. I'm not gonna make you go for a couple hours sitting. So I'll turn it over to Allie. Allie, do you need to share your screen at all?
No, I think I'll just talk. I don't have a PowerPoint prepared. Hi, everyone. I am Allie, and I do, like what Kate said, the conversational portion of the intensive class that Nancy Quo teaches for most of the session, and then I'm just like the little buffer zone in between her sessions. And before COVID hit, it was mostly us. I would structure the class opening with conversation circles. We'd read the newspaper together, do dictation, and sometimes we would watch and discuss a TED Talk, or we'd read another article. Now that we're online, I will say it's a huge learning curve, which goes into like one piece of advice that I would give someone teaching who's new to teaching online, that it's going to be a learning curve because especially in these situations where we were kind of thrown into this. It was so sudden. So brief description of my class level. So how I'm running the class now that I'm on Zoom is that I've extended portions of my former structure and just done away with other parts. So we do the conversation circles that we would normally have in the beginning of the class, but now we do that for 30 minutes. My classes are an hour long instead of 2 at this point on Mondays and Wednesdays. Sorry, I should have said that earlier. But we do conversation for 30 minutes, and then the next 30 minutes we read together. I'm comfortable using the screen share, so I'll pick out an article, we'll read it together, and since my students are advanced students, they have a really good grasp on the language. We're just fine-tuning things. So we'll read together, and within each paragraph, we'll go over new vocabulary, grammatical structures, etc. as they come up, and we'll ask questions, and we'll have discussions based on what we read, and that is our structure for now. It took us a while to get there. So at first we just did conversation, and as we all got used to Zoom, we have, I guess, upgraded or leveled up with what we do. So right now we are working on reading and then writing summaries of what we read. So we put things in chunks. I apologize, there's a little bit of background noise where I am. So today we read half an article, we summarized half the article together. In next class, when we read the next part of the article, we're going to summarize the whole thing. How we got the idea of a summary was it's something that we're borrowing from Nancy's class, our in-person intensive session, and the students really like that, so we're bringing that back into our online Zoom. I think the benefits or other benefits that, you know, both Madeline and Diane have said, it's connection. My students really love the fact that they have a place that they can be for an hour twice a week where they can see other people and practice their English, and talk about COVID too. So in the beginning when we do our discussion portion, I always have room for us to talk about like the impacts of COVID-19. Even sometimes my discussion questions, while I might mean them as something that's broad about things in general, tie it back to how COVID is affecting them within that question. So it's good to see how folks are thinking, their fears, anxieties, their hopes, and we talk about those, and I make sure it's just like a safe space for us to talk about those things. So the connection is a really big part in the benefit, and other benefits that they've identified have also been just, you know, having that place to practice English, because in their households they'll speak their native language, their heritage language. Another benefit is, as other tutors have said, is location. So one of my students went to Mexico to be with her family, but she can still participate in this class with us, which is fantastic. And my classes are about, they're anywhere from 3 people in a class to 6. So we usually generally have like 4 or 5. Today we had 3, and it was very informal, but educational as per usual, because we're still practicing and we're making sure that we're getting things out of what we do and that we learn. I also have at least 5 minutes in my class for feedback, which is how we have developed the class. And so as I'm learning Zoom more and as they're getting more comfortable with Zoom, they suggest things. Okay, I'll be like, we're going to read these articles and I'm thinking about this and us incorporating these things. And then a student suggested, hey, let's bring in making summaries about it too. So it's nice to see that we're all growing together in this. We tell each other all the time that we'll all be Zoom experts by the time this is over. We recognize it's a learning process. And how have I accommodated diverse proficiency levels and diverse techiness levels? Well, luckily, all of my students are mostly advanced, and something that I've seen in this class, especially with discussion, they will talk to each other about certain tech issues. I know in other classes, so if you have a class full of Spanish speakers, they can talk to each other and help with Zoom, but I don't really have that in my class. We have a Japanese speaker, we have a Spanish speaker, we have a speaker who speaks someone who speaks Farsi, we have a Mandarin speaker, and we have 2 Spanish speakers actually. So I don't have what other folks have with being able to have the students help, but within their English proficiency, they're able to help each other, and I'll try and help too, especially now that I'm more familiar with share screen, and show them how I'm doing it and being able to talk over it in that way. But that's our class. We're growing together, we're learning together. I realized that you can annotate your screen when you share screen. So I told my students that, and that's something that I'm going to look into between this class and next class, so that while we read, I can annotate. When we would go over our TED Talks in person, I would write notes while the TED Talk was happening if there was no transcript, just so that we would have talking points and discussion points. So this will be some point like reminiscent of that, where like highlighting things that I think are important, vocabulary words for us to come back to. And yeah, we're just very informal, we're growing together, and we're finding what works for us. And I know that we're very fortunate because we're a very small group and not all classes can work like that. Someone asked, what do you do with the summaries that they write? Do they send them to you via email? We will take some time and they'll write down their summaries and then we read them. on Zoom. We read articles together since I can screen share and all that other stuff. So we're very comfortable with just speaking with each other on Zoom, because some students don't always like to write their summaries. Some students will just like, they'll ask me, oh, am I understanding this correctly? And then they'll summarize it just right there, I guess. Not as formal as writing it down, but some students will write it down and read it to me as well.
You mean that they're just writing it on notebook paper right there?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And I forgot to mention that we use the chat a lot too. So while students are speaking, instead of interrupting them to make corrections, I just type things in the chat, especially as idioms come up too in our readings, just typing things in so that I don't interrupt someone when they're speaking, because that can really disrupt their thinking. So we'll go over that, and it serves as notes for me as well to remember, oh, we're coming back to this. And I put lots of definitions in that. I have not started using the whiteboard feature as much as I probably should, but our students all know how to use the chat. We have 2 students who use from their cell phones, and they know how to get to the chat and write into it. And my other students who use their computers also are proficient with chat.
So it's both you
I
and
feel
the
like I cut
students
you off.
using chat.
Mm-hmm. It's mostly me, but the students will also type in questions sometimes.
And you use it like for error correction, for giving examples, giving definitions,
Yes,
explanations, etc.
all of those.
Cool. Great. So we've got some questions in the chat box here. Cindy asked about chat. Okay. Stu recommended a book called Newcomers. Stu, do you want to talk about that book quick?
Yeah, just briefly. It's a very nice book about a school in Denver that gets an influx of people who are not conversant in English, and they have classes dedicated to pre-emergent and emergent speakers, and then move them into the regular classrooms eventually. The story involves about a journalist who spent a year in the class and then got much more intimate with several of the students and visited them at home. And it was very nice about how a group of the youngsters assimilated into American culture. So I think it fits in the wheelhouse of a lot of our interests, and it was a little bit beyond the classes that we do to really see the results of how these people matured in their experience.
I'll include that in the notes that I send out afterwards. Let's see. Well, I'll take Karen's question. Allie, do you have a procedure for reading an article together?
Yes, I do. So when we read an article together, usually it's an article that I have sent them before. I'll email them the article if they want to look at it before class. And when we get to reading, so we have 3 students today, so we just broke the article down into basically 3 paragraph chunks. Each person would read a paragraph, and sorry, I had to back up a little bit to make sure I was talking in the right direction, if that makes sense. So we have 3 students, each one reads a paragraph. And so after each paragraph in general, I'll ask them, what questions do you have? Because I noticed when I said, do you have any questions? They might say no, or they might come up with less questions. When I say, what questions do you have? They always will come up and generate questions, which is really good for discussion. And so after all 3 of them have read, I'll stop and we'll discuss the article a little bit for understanding. And that's where some of the summary elements come in too. And I'll ask questions. They'll ask questions about the whole thing that they've read so far. And then we just continue on like that until we finish. So in a 30-minute chunk, sometimes we don't finish an article. Like today we're reading an article from Psychology Today about flexibility within crisis, and it's about COVID-19. My students, a lot of their headspace is within COVID-19, and so I am just trying to make sure I find things that are about like flexibility, adapting, finding good information, because I'm listening to their, like I said, their anxieties, their hopes, and all this about this. So I make sure the material that we covers what they are thinking about. And so when we read, I just make sure it's for understanding, and we'll go through the whole article. And sometimes we don't finish it in our 30-minute chunks, but we'll just save it for next class. We pick it up, and someone will generally re-summarize what we read last time to remind us what we have read, and then we'll just hop back in.
Great. So you are mostly finding articles online, and are you using News4U at all?
I haven't been using News4U, but I need to start using that again because I know my students like it, and I like the selection of articles they have from it. But sometimes the articles that I pick out are based on something that we talked about in a previous class. So I will find articles that speak to what they were interested in. I will find and curate that information for them.
Great. We had a question from Bobby. She asked, do those working with beginners give the students time to just visit with each other, like catch up, say at the beginning of class? And Diane said a little bit of visiting takes place. We always ask how everyone is doing. The limitations of language mean it's very simple. Diane, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, basically because most of my students are, they don't speak the same languages, and their English is so limited, they can't ask very detailed questions of each other. And if they do, accents often mean that they don't understand it terribly well. But we always try to say, you know, how are you doing? Are you okay? That kind of thing.
Great. And Madeline, I know your class is all Spanish speaking. Do they check in with each other?
Yeah, there's a little bit for sure. I mean, especially because we usually start about 10 minutes after the starting time to let everyone come in, and it does take a bit of time for people to enter. So class usually officially begins at 10:10. Honestly, having a WhatsApp group with everyone has been so beneficial because the group now knows each other so intimately. They share information about how their families are doing and even drop things off at each other's houses and exchange resources. I know that not everyone in your class may not have the same apps on their phone, but I do think that if there's a way to create a community space outside of the Zoom class, it really helps with that feeling of community. So there is a bit of time where people ask questions for each other. We always start with, how are you? And a lot of the subject matter has changed in the class to, like, we immediately covered feelings. So we talk a lot about emotions now, which we weren't really talking about too much in the food bank. It's taken precedence in this class, but there is I try to limit the amount of Spanish being spoken. So perhaps there's a bit in that first 10 minutes, but that really takes place more in the WhatsApp group. So I don't know how best for each class. It will probably look different for each group of people, and just encouraging people, or perhaps creating yourself a message thread on a different platform that people can use to be able to connect with each other outside of class. I think has been really important for all my students to have.
Great, thank you. I don't think we clapped for Allie, did we? Thanks, Allie. Okay, so we are halfway through our presenters and Zoom is exhausting. So everybody take a step away from your computer and stand up. And put your arms up overhead and go to one side. And then the other. And what else? Move your legs, like kick your legs. Yeah, kick them forward. And then let's do some twisting. This is gonna look great in the video. Okay. Have a seat if you feel stretched out.
That was very good to have. Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome. I can only sit for so long. I miss my standing desk. Okay, so next we have Kathy Zuodar, who teaches intermediate at Sacred Heart Church. And Kathy, do you have a PowerPoint to share? Shall I give you screen sharing privileges? Okay. Okay, you should have access now.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. This is just simple, but it was, you know, seems like it might be a good idea. Okay. Good. There we go. Yeah, so I teach normally. I've been teaching at Sacred Heart Church, the intermediate class with Cindy Kramer, who's also in our group today. So this is kind of a summary. We've been meeting online since April 9th. We missed a couple of weeks after the spring break, and then we started again on April 9th. Usually our classes were 12 to 15 students, sometimes more. Online, we usually have 6 or 7, so it's just about half as many. Not, there's a core of about 6, and then a couple of others that come in and out if they can make it. We asked the students, knowing that several of them had young children that are home and might be studying at the time of our class, we asked them, I'm trying to move this around so you can see, did they want to keep our class at the normal time that we would meet at the church? And they said yes, they did. Probably because it was carved into their schedules already. I think there's only, well, there are 3 of our core of 6 were with us at least one semester before this, and 3 of them are new. So we still do our normal class schedule. And we recently, actually just Thursday, asked the students, do you want to continue longer to make up some of the time that we missed before we got going on the online classes? And they unanimously did want to do that. So we're going to run our class until May 21st to make up a couple of those weeks that we missed. So how we got started. Well, that's always an interesting thing. Oh, I'm gonna go back. I missed that one. How we got started. The first thing we did was text all of the students, because you've probably noticed that people don't monitor their email, or at least the students don't. So I wanted to email them a link to an online class. We do use Zoom, but we knew that they probably didn't monitor their email. So we texted them first and said, hey, are you interested in an online class? We're going to email everyone with instructions how to get started on Zoom. You have to download the Zoom client, and here's a link and that kind of thing. So some responded to the text, a lot did. Cindy took half the list and I took half, and we just texted everybody. Then I put out an email to everybody, probably 3 days after that, with the link to the first class, and also instructions on downloading the Zoom client, either on your phone or on your computer. And some, I think more now of our core group use computers, but some do use phones. And then Cindy and I set up some Zoom meetings and we practiced before we started having class with the students, because we didn't know pretty much how it worked at all. So we practiced for a couple of times. So these are the things that have been successful for us. It's good for conversation practice, and intermediate students need a lot of conversation practice, because in our experience, they know a lot of words, but making sentences is difficult. Stringing them together in the right order with the right grammar is hard. So we practice conversation online. That works well. Cindy's done a great job with pronunciation activities. Sounds that are difficult for them and pronunciation of words. It's been good for read and discuss activities. We'll read an article or a story. Cindy's good at finding stories. So, and then we have discussions based on those. Last week we had a dialogue that students did with a partner. So that works well. Probably going to work well for dictation. We haven't tried that yet, but the students want it. So we're going to try that probably this week. We've done grammar. We kind of picked up, we were working on verb tenses because that's always of interest to the group. And that we were able to pick up with that and keep going just like we did in class. And it's been really good for vocabulary. You can use either chat or the whiteboard to type words and synonyms and definitions and spelling and all kinds of things. So all those activities have worked well using the Zoom platform. The things that have been challenging, the one that breaks, only the students that have good Wi-Fi access have been able to join the class. And we know there are others who want to, but they can't. There are at least probably another 5 or 6 that want to. One of them tries all the time, but she's not very good with technology. And sometimes we see her, but we can't hear her. And then, so I don't know. I don't have a solution for that, but it's something that we think about all the time. Another challenge is that almost none of our students can print. They don't have printing capability. So they can read our emails and we send attachments, but they can't print them. So that means they don't have a paper copy to look at during class. They can see it if we share it on the screen, but they don't have anything to write notes on, or they can't go away from the screen and read it. No handouts is a bigger thing than you would think. I didn't think we relied that much on handouts, but apparently we do more than I thought. Sorry, that's my phone ringing in the background. So it is tricky to disseminate information to people because you can't give them anything to look at or to read. And then there are connectivity issues, including mine. I've been having internet problems in Zoom conferences, and sometimes, I don't know. So I'm looking into that, but I'm not the only one that has those problems. People come in and out because they just can't stay connected sometimes. So those are some of the challenges. But we have had some pleasant surprises doing it this way. Breakout rooms are wonderful. They're actually better in some ways than doing it in a physical classroom, because our physical classroom was one big room. So if you got pairs or little groups of students, it got noisy trying to work on things. Breakout rooms, you can put 2 or 3 or 4 students in a room, and only those 4 people are talking together. They're not hearing the other groups, which is really nice. And we can do some things online that we couldn't do in our classroom. We had no way to project anything we didn't have Wi-Fi. So what we can do on the Zoom classroom, though, is we can watch videos together. And we can show pictures. We started something last week where Cindy showed a family picture of hers and talked about it. We invited the students to send their pictures so that they can do the same thing. That's something we couldn't do before. So there is actually some good things about doing it this way. This is what we've learned so far. Everything takes longer. It just takes a long time to do the same things, right, Diane? I can see you nodding. It takes a long time to do the same things that you were going to do, because you have to allow for connections. You have to allow for the awkwardness of manipulating the screen so that everybody can see things. It just takes a while. We found it helped to review the etiquette for working online. The first day we did it, we did a vocabulary list with words like mute and chat and, all of the words that we thought they might need. And that helped. And we do that at the beginning of a physical class too. We say, if you need to take a phone call, please step outside, all those same little housekeeping things. We just did that too. That was helpful. You have to call on people, we think, because otherwise everybody waits for everybody to talk, and then they decide nobody's going to talk, so then everybody starts to talk. So it's easier to just call on people when you want them to answer.
Sorry to interrupt, about 1 more minute.
Okay, almost done. The students are often really isolated, and they are so happy to see each other. It's unbelievable. I feel like I'm nervous and stressed, and they're an order of magnitude more nervous and stressed. Some do not go outside their houses, their apartments. It's amazing. They're really isolated. Some are new to Tucson, and this is what passes for friends to them. This is what they have. We email summaries and notes after the class to everyone. We send them to everyone, not just the people who logged into the class. We send them to everyone. So vocabulary lists, articles that we read, anything that we did in class, I put it onto notes and send it as an attachment to email. We try to send people stuff before the class if we can, like things that we're going to talk about in the next class. So be thinking about your answers or something to read for the upcoming class. The students like homework. It gives them, I think, something interesting to do while they're isolated. Many of them are alone or alone with a spouse that's still working. So they like having homework and things to do. These are typically the more dedicated students that come to this class, and they're looking for things to read. They're looking for things to do at home. And for screen sharing, this is a practical tip. You got to use a large font and wide margins because people looking at it on a phone, it's kind of compressed. So when we type a story, we want everything to be right in the middle. So it makes it just easier for people to read. And I think that's all I have. Yep, that's it.
Let's give Kathy a round of applause. Thanks, Kathy. Great tips. Questions for Kathy? Bobby asked a question about breakout rooms. There are some really excellent video tutorials out there about how to make and use breakout rooms. So I'll include that in the email.
The part about breakout rooms is you have to go into your settings and enable breakout rooms.
Yes.
You see the breakout room button on the bottom. Yeah.
Which I learned the hard way during that first Zoom continuing education
Me
session
too.
we had. I was like, where did it go? Where is it? I have a question for you, kind of all of you who have presented. So Kathy mentioned being able to get in touch with her students via email, being able to email them homework and things like that. Our experience at the office has been that the vast majority of students don't check or don't have access to their email. Like when Jennifer first sent out the notice about the classes closing, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails bounced back. And we don't know how many were actually opened. So it's working for you, Kathy, which is great. Diane and Madeline, I'm wondering if email works for you at all. Or Emily and Sara as well.
I haven't tried email. I know for a fact that at least a couple of my students don't use email. I use the WhatsApp group to communicate with people through the group message, or I'll private message people.
I think the only reason it works for us is because we texted them first and said, look at your email.
Okay.
And now they're sort of like in the habit of looking at their email.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
I don't think they would have otherwise.
So you sent them all texts to connect and then said, hey, we're sending you an email, check your email.
Yes, yes.
Great. And now you're sort of training them to check their email for class stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just like the equivalent of a classroom routine. It's an online class routine. Sara, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that most of our students don't have access to internet, and that is the challenging part. So they don't have email addresses either. So.
Okay, great. Diane says, I've been using email, but I'm mostly communicating with family members and not the students themselves. She texts with her iPad because she doesn't have a cell phone. So connecting with family members. Emily says, I like the tech vocabulary list for Kathy. Did you find that it helped them learn to use mute just to go over the meaning?
Yes, I think so, because people I have noticed them muting themselves when their children are walking through, or when they turn around and talk to their children, or when they're coughing or something like that. Yeah, I think you do. We told them that etiquette says keep yourself muted unless you're planning to talk. And I think they do.
So just like in class, when we teach, in the beginning levels anyway, we teach raise your hand, stand up, sit down. It's the same thing. This is a new kind of classroom expectation. Cool. Great. Well, now let's turn it over to Sara. Did we clap for Kathy? Kathy gets a double clap. Sara is the director of the Refugee Education Program at Pima Community College in the Adult Basic Education for College and Career. And Sara, do you want me to share the PowerPoint, or would you like to share it from your screen?
I can share it from my screen if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. Let me find you on the list. Okay, there you go.
Do you see my screen now?
I do not. There we go.
Okay, good. So, hello everyone. My name is Sara Haghigi. I'm the coordinator of the Education Program at Pima Community College. For today, just wanted to briefly explain how our program functioned before COVID-19 hit our community and how it changed after. As most of you may know, our program is funded by Arizona Department of Economic Security, Refugee Resettlement Program, and the purpose of it is to provide ESL classes for refugees, SIVs, and asylees who've been here less than 5 years and have been settled in Pima County. Throughout the years, we saw that because of the political situation of the country, unfortunately, the number of students that we received cut down, and that is because of the limitations that we have over bringing refugees to the United States and accepting them to the state of Arizona. And travel ban didn't help that at all. The numbers that you see here for 2020, they were the numbers that it's just for the first 2 months of the year. And now there is a pause on receiving refugees and immigrants to the US. The top nationalities that we served in the past year, they were mostly from Congo, Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan, Syria, Burundi, and Central Africa Republic. We offer our classes in 2 different campuses. 29th Street Coalition Center is our main office. We have 8 classes there. El Rio is another location that we offer classes. We have 2 classes there. We offer morning and evening classes in 3 different levels: adult emergent reader, low beginning, and high beginning. We have a vessel class, which is English for food handlers, and we also have 1 citizenship class. This program is in addition to our ABAC program, which offers the ELAA program and GED program, which is funded through the Department of Education. We used to have classes 4 days a week, 2 hours per day. We had open enrollment because we wanted to register students as soon as they would get to the United States. Usually based on the contract that we have, students need to be registered within the first month of their arrivals. So that brings our students to be open enrollment. We did not have strict attendance policy because of the situation of adult education that you're all familiar with, and also because of refugees specifically. We would receive students with various educational background. This would impact their knowledge in technology as well. Most students that they came with some sort of education from their native countries, they knew how to use technology. They were familiar. They might even have laptops or iPads. But we also offer classes to adult emergent readers. 80% of our program is adult emergent readers, and they usually don't know how to use technology. This was a brief description of our program prior to COVID-19 crisis. After when COVID-19 hit our community, PCC decided to suspend face-to-face classes as of March 17th. We still don't have any date to go back to the campus. We stopped registrations and we stopped face-to-face classes. At the beginning, it wasn't very challenging for us because our program was going on a break for 2 weeks. So that gave us the 2-week break to prepare for our virtual classes. But at the beginning, we didn't know what's going to happen. We didn't know if the campus was going to be closed only for 2 weeks or it would take even longer. What we did was that we started contacting our students. We used Language Line to contact our students. We just wanted to make sure that our students know that we will offer classes virtually. Some of them were very nervous that the campus closure might mean that they don't have any classes anymore, and that would impact their benefits. We just wanted to make sure that they know that we still think about them and we care, and we will offer our classes differently. Also, we wanted to create the community that we had face-to-face. Our teachers worked very hard to build that community and make family inside each class. Now we want to change the dynamic of that and make it virtual. We wanted to make sure that our students feel that they're connected with their classmates, with their instructors. While we contacted them, we made sure that we have their correct addresses and correct phone numbers so we can communicate with them by mail as well. During the 2-week break, we asked our instructors to prepare some homework packets for students because we knew that most of our students, they don't have internet access, or if they do, they may not have an electronic device. So we didn't want to have any gap, so our teachers put together homework packets for their students, and we connected teachers and students together so they can help them with working on the homework packets. We also asked our students, we did a needs analysis to see how many of our students, they didn't have internet, how many they had internet, no electronic device, or how many of them they would receive a laptop from their resettlement agency, or if they had any K-12 children, they would receive one from their school district. It was very important. This needs analysis was very important for us because we realized that half of our students, they don't have access to get online, either because of not having internet access or because of not having devices. So we started looking for opportunities to provide some sort of technology assistance for our students. PCC was able to lend some iPads to students, and International Rescue Committee also gave out some laptops to students. This enabled most of our students to get hands on some electronic devices. We are still working on getting internet access for students, for households that they don't have any. This has been challenging, but we are working on it. We realized that since virtual classes are something new to our students, they may not have enough time to learn how to use technology and learn content. So we added tutoring hours in addition to the regular class hours. That way, if teachers want to break the class into smaller groups and they want to help students in smaller capacity, then they would have more hours to work with students. We also made sure that we have weekly check-ins with instructors to see what their needs are. They are the ones that actually are doing this job. I've taught for years and years, but I've never taught in this situation that all of a sudden we don't have any face-to-face classes and we have to do the instruction online. This is very different from having hybrid instructions. I've done that when I was teaching in ELAA program, but for adult emergent reader, this is totally a new world. And personally, I don't have experience. The only thing is just to support our instructors, and that's how I gain my experience. Emily is our instructor that she's coming up after me, and she will explain about how she's teaching her own class. So at the beginning, when we went virtual, we thought that we would lose a lot of our students. Last session, we had 113 active students. We started the first week with 69 students. The second week, we had 88 students, and by third week, we had 135 students. That was surprising for us because before, students couldn't go to our face-to-face classes because of different barriers. Childcare was an issue, transportation was an issue. Now they are at home, they don't have childcare issues. The class goes to their home. So this unfortunate situation wasn't very bad for our students. So many of them reached out to us and then they requested to join our classes.
Sarah, about 1 more minute.
Sure, thank you. And then we realized that this situation is also traumatizing for our students because 90% of them, they lost their jobs. And now they are at home. They don't know when they go to stores, they find stores empty. It's very traumatizing for our students. And we realized that how much they love learning English and their classes are something now that they are at home. This is an opportunity to invest on their language learning and on themselves to prepare for themselves, for future. And actually, that's it.
Thank you, Sarah. We didn't have any questions in the chat box. What questions do you all have? I definitely have some, but I want to hear from you first. Okay, here's my first question. What is SIV?
Sure. Special immigrant visas, these are the visa holder, these are clients that they usually come from Afghanistan or Iraq that they worked with American troops there. They were mostly interpreters.
So it sounds like the kind of extra things that you've added in are this, the tutoring is outside of the normal class time?
Yes.
And is that a space for students to get more tech support, or is it for more language practice?
Either way, we added the tutoring hours for teachers to evaluate if a student needs extra attention on homework, or they might not know how to use technology and they want to learn, and we don't want to kind of waste our class time on teaching one particular student how to turn on an iPad or turn it off or something like that. So teachers could use this time for any reason that they think is best.
So it's the built-in way of accommodating the diverse English levels and the diverse technology.
Exactly. And it's very important for teachers to be connected to their administrators, and it's very important that they be very descriptive how their classes are, what their needs are, because this is totally new to us. We don't know how everything is total. So our program structure changed after this. So it's very good if you, now that there are a lot of instructors here, they don't have to feel bad if they are not, they invest a lot of time and energy and they are frustrated with the current situation. It's best for their administrators to hear that so they can address all these needs.
So it's kind of like you've created like a teacher support group where the teachers are sharing what
Exactly.
works, they're sharing what doesn't work, they're sharing frustrations, joys, etc.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks, Sarah. And last but not least, we have Emily, who is an instructor in the Refugee Education Program. And Emily, I know you have slides to share, so I'm gonna give you access here.
Who has already used WhatsApp? Could you just raise your hand? Okay. We have like 7 teachers. Okay, awesome. So my name is Emily and Sara is my supervisor. I have the lowest level of the refugee education program. So emergent readers who are also new to learning English. And on the left here is one of my students learning to use the mouse. This is about the tech level of a lot of my students, and tapping on their phones is similarly difficult. But on the other hand, on the right are 3 students who have been able to make and respond to video calls on WhatsApp, and I'm really impressed with a lot of their abilities. So students are either learning to write numbers that they don't read and write in their first language, or they may be able to write and read. I have a vast difference in my classes. What I'm doing instead of meeting face-to-face is group video chats for about 20 to 30 minutes and one-on-one video chats for 10 to 15 minutes. I have a volunteer on Thursdays, and I'm also doing one-on-one myself. So when you do group video chat on WhatsApp, as many of you might know, you can have up to 3 students with you, 4 people on the phone, although that makes your screen 1/4 the size if you want to point it at a whiteboard or anything. So when I do one-on-one or with a group, I might write words that were special interest to the student, or we were working on spelling, and then I take a photo of the whiteboard and send it to them after. We also might go over the vocabulary, like their homework packet that's arriving in the mail this week has mask, scarf, and then it goes on to vocabulary for things they have in the home, like spoon and fork. So on the right is the phone version of WhatsApp. On the left is what it looks like on your computer. I don't want to spend so much time staring at my phone. So I actually do anything with text from my computer. And at the end, there's a link to, or yeah, I'll make sure there's a link in this too, to get that on your computer. You can't make calls from your computer. You can't share your screen. Those are the only drawbacks of WhatsApp, but you can, look at a larger screen. So I use it for text and audio assignments, one-on-one conversations or groups. In the groups, I have the picture of our old classroom. This is both the phone view and then what it looks like on the desktop. Just like the general information that I can see about the group. And I have one for my classroom. So this is the Southeast Tucson at 29th Street, and this is West Tucson at El Rio. I have asked, what is the date today, in an audio message to both my classes, and I get both audio and text responses. I will add, like, some of the students are doing it on their own, but others, I know their family is helping them, and I'm encouraging that, since they're learning to record audio messages, and I think it's within reach for them to be able to do that soon independently. I have also in the Pima, in the English cloud room, I have 18 students who I'm communicating with right now during virtual, and at 29th Street, room 20, I have 10 students I'm communicating with during virtual. I've also asked, where are you from? Again, I got audio and text responses. And some other examples, you can ask, how are you today? How's your family? All the things that you typically ask during class are going well over this. Not everybody responds. Also, some people aren't in the group, so I make sure I take the extra time to send the question to them individually. That's because I got consent from everybody to add them to the group. When you add them to a WhatsApp group, everybody can see their phone number. Not that they'll have the technological ability to like go and look at the phone numbers, but technically they can. So I got consent, and a couple students said no thank you. I did a lot of matching before it was virtual. So I'm trying to do that like this. I say, text me a photo, stove. And I did an example this time because it was the first question I ever asked them to send me a photo, take a photo, or, and then I also said, children, please help your students read the word, please help your parents read the word stove, and text me a photo of stove, because I'm hoping that the students will learn to do this independently, but they just need a little support from their kids, their English-speaking family and technology-savvy family. On the left is a homework packet, and that was items in the house related to the bathroom. And so I flipped the matching activity and sent the photo, and they can go look at their homework packet and then respond with the name of what's in the picture. So some students responded in text. On the right is an example of giving feedback. So I didn't do this in the group, but in the one-on-one text conversation with the student, I know she can, so this is not most students, but she's not an emergent reader. She's just learning to speak English for the very first time, very low level. So she speaks Spanish, and I know she's using Translate on her phone. So I sent her some feedback in English, and she can translate it. But in other cases, I wouldn't put that many words because they don't really use translators or read in their first language. So they're learning digital literacy. They're learning to be tech savvy from their families. In some cases, I'm just calling them on the phone and having conversation practice because their family hasn't been able to help them out, or the video chat is really, everybody I can call on video chat, but it's really, really choppy, and we can't even hear each other because they don't have Wi-Fi. So sometimes I just call them on the phone, like you would dial any number. I've been doing group video with students from across town in my 2 different classes because they speak the same language and they've never met. Or in one case, they knew each other and they were like, hi, and they didn't know they had the same teacher. And then we do class like I would with one-on-one. There's differentiation when they can respond with text or audio, also because I can do one-on-one conversations with the students. It does take more time, but it doesn't, when you think about like the difficulty of getting everybody together in one classroom for 2 hours, and if you take any time with an individual student, the others are waiting, and sometimes that can just be more difficult than being able to call them up. They have the teacher's phone number, and after this is over, I'm gonna make sure that they can contact me. You can use your own phone number or you can set up a fake phone number, but that they can contact me is something I should have been doing for a long time. They like to be able to say, I'm sick, let me know why they couldn't come to school, which happens still. Sometimes they don't wanna do class. So the sync photo, student sent that to me and her son helped her do that. I hope she learns to do it independently. She also put a little sticky note on it that says sync because I sent sticky notes to my students in the mail. The family helps most of the students use the phone, although in some cases they can do it on their own. If they aren't texting on their own, I don't want their family helping them too much. I need some time where it's just me and the student, and so I do video chat more often with them. And if they're not going to learn to text very soon, I'm making sure that they're learning to send photos and audio messages independently as soon as possible so that they can participate. So my top piece of advice is to send links to resources, because you can't always be like on the video call with them. And it takes a lot of time, even if you get 3 students on the phone at the same time. So they're wanting more English. I'm sending them messages with links and teaching them to tap on the link, and I model using it when we're face to face on the phone. I'll model using it and then check in with them. I'm trying to check in with everybody to make sure that they're able to use it, so I know who's able to use it and who's not. Some resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily.
What questions? I learned from Allie. What questions do you all have? Not do you have any questions, but what questions do you have?
Let's give Emily a round of applause. So I'll make sure to get those resources from that slide, and I'll include them in the follow-up email. Questions? Emily, it sounds like you are, like WhatsApp has a whole kind of suite of tools that you can use to support students. Like for students who aren't able to text yet, you can use video chat. There's the sending photos. There's all of this extra stuff.
Yeah, I'm able to at least video chat with everybody, and if you have a strong Wi-Fi connection, you can get 3 students on, and I'm okay if that's all they can do independently. Diane asked, what all can you do on WhatsApp from a desktop? You can do everything except make calls. Like if you need to call a student or start a group video call, you have to pick up your phone. And if you want to record audio, you have to pick up your phone. Other than that, it's the same, just so you're looking at a bigger screen. And I'll include a link also for how to get that.
When Jennifer and I were playing with it, we had our phones with the video chat, and then on the desktop version, we were able to like attach files and
yes,
do the chat on there, and it was much easier than doing it on the phone. So just the phone here for the video.
Yeah, you can attach files from your phone, but if the files are on your computer, with my volunteer, we're finding that it's really easiest to put in the effort to get the desktop version to upload files.
Great. And then Jennifer asked, how many hours of instruction does each student get per week?
I spend, like I said, it depends on if it's one-on-one or video. But say they're in a video chat, they're getting 1 hour on the video chat per week, and then they're getting time with the homework packets and messages. Maybe I'm communicating with their family, maybe I'm communicating with them, responding to questions in the group chat. And also the resources that I send them, I follow up and I say, how many minutes did you spend on it? I'm trying to provide them a buffet of options, because I'm finding that some of them are actually more busy now because their children aren't in school. But 1 hour on video chat a week, down from, yeah, a lot more hours of face-to-face instruction.
Bobby asked, have you used Zoom? And if so, which do you find easier?
If I'm gonna, so I Zoomed with one student I find WhatsApp video chat is easier because I can call anybody. They know how to answer that. I have a lot of students who won't be able to even tap on a link. Some of them are starting to tap on a link, and I do use, so I can share my screen. I use Google Hangouts, but if they can't, I'm trying to make sure they still get the English practice in instead of just spending all our time on getting them set up with technology. So WhatsApp is just easier because my students already have it. Like, I know that a lot of people in the US didn't, but they all use it to communicate with their family in other countries. So they know how to answer a video call.
So it's almost like there's a slightly lower tech learning curve with WhatsApp.
For the students, absolutely. For translating a class to WhatsApp is definitely difficult.
And I want to go back to something Emily mentioned, that when students are in a group in WhatsApp, they can see everybody's phone numbers. So it's important to get consent from the students that they be put in that group, because there may be people who don't want their phone numbers visible to others. So like Emily said, in that case, you can text them outside of the group or just use regular old-fashioned telephone.
I've had issues with audio. Yes. Madeline, one student uses headphones, and I think that's better, but I'm mostly trying not to do pronunciation too much if I can tell they can't hear me well, and I get their family to say the word. Most of the time their family's right there anyway, so I'm encouraging that because they can't really hear pronunciation very well, or even the sentence. I mean, so the family's been helping with that.
Jennifer asks if you have a set time for video calls with your students.
I have appointments set up. I do. And in some cases, it's taking me some time because they miss it, but I'm trying to reach them anyway. So we reschedule. And when I say like schedule, I mean just message each other on the phone, audio or text, whatever they're going to be able to understand.
Awesome. Wow. That's really impressive. Let's give Rep a round of applause for pivoting so amazingly, so quickly. It's really impressive. Very cool. Very cool. Emily mentioned sending students work to do outside of class. When this all first happened, Jennifer sent out an email to all the students announcing it, that I mentioned earlier, with all the emails that bounced back. That email had a whole list of resources for students to practice outside of class. I'll include that list in this follow-up email as well. This is going to be a really long follow-up email. Okay, we are well over our time that we said we were going to end. Thank you to all of our presenters for sharing what works, what doesn't work, how you've been feeling about it. That has been really super informative for me, and I hope for everybody else as well. Thanks so much for sharing your experience. So just to wrap up, what I'm hearing from all of our presenters is that it's an opportunity for a lot of learning for both the teachers and for the students. Everybody's gaining digital literacy skills and being really creative problem solvers. I heard the importance of just connection, and that there's no one size fits all approach, that just figuring it out as we go along is okay, and creating that safe space, just like we do in the classroom, for students to connect with each other and with us is going to be really important. There are a ton of resources online. A lot of them I'll include in this email, but also remember, if you decide that you want to step into this and try it, I can help. I may not know the answer, but I'll definitely be moral support while you're trying to figure it out. I have really enjoyed learning about all these platforms, and I'm happy to learn alongside you all as well. Yeah, and just a reminder to be patient and kind with yourself as we all figure this out. It's a huge undertaking, but we can do it. I'll turn it over to Jen.
Sorry.
I was muted, telling you that you were muted.
That I had already unmuted. Just a quick overview of next steps. We hope that if you do decide after this that you want to reconnect with students, feel free to contact Sheila to get contact information. So phone numbers, emails, that sort of thing. I think as we heard today, if you're going to send an email, follow up with a text saying, I sent an email, or even just do straight out texting might be a faster way, or call. If you do reach out to your students, will you let us know? We're trying to kind of keep track of everything that's happening out there. If you decide to try some tutoring, even with one student or a couple of students, some teaching, we'd love to know that that's happening. We'd love to even capture your time and your students' time so we can kind of share with the community what's happening. Sheila's been advising people to just use the attendance link that you had before to keep track of any additional attendance or meetings with students. And just so that you know, again, we're going to be trying to make some decisions about what's going to happen this summer. Getting as much information as we can, but as you know, it's an evolving target. We suspect that Zoom will be part of what we're doing. Zoom and maybe WhatsApp will be part of what we're trying out this summer. So anything you can do to learn is fabulous, even if it's with your own family or with friends. And we are looking into getting more Zoom licenses through Literacy Connect so that we can support you in using this technology if it's something you're interested in, so it doesn't have to come out of your own pocket. We're looking at getting some funding for that. So that's kind of where we are. We're so glad you've stuck with us and engaged these few past weeks, attending Kate's sessions, and we miss you all so much, seeing you in person, but we still feel connected thanks to this technology. So thank you all, and onward in our learning together, and let's stay in touch.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Have a good rest of your day.